David for being here to moderate the discussion. This is our first gathering for my book, and it will be more like a celebration. All right, so let's go.
Well, thank you, everyone. Thank you very much, Yunus. I'm greatly honored to be here and asked to moderate for such an important occasion. Agon and Nietzsche, I've just read it for the first time, and I say that because it's certainly one of those volumes that I'm going to go to over and over and over again. And I want to talk about that a little bit over the next few minutes without completely dominating things. But again, as the title suggests, Agon and Nietzsche, the theme of contestation is very much at stake. And so one of the overarching themes is that of friends and enemies and rivalry and things of that nature. So as a friend, I thought it was very nice of him to invite me, but in the spirit of contest, the last time I sat next to him up here, it was because we both had a book release. But beat me. So I'm feeling surpassed by my friend here in the spirit of contest. But again, this is such a tremendous achievement, Agon and Nietzsche. I don't know how many of you have had the chance to start reading it, if not having read the whole thing yet. It's 13 chapters, an absolute tour de force through Nietzsche's corpus and this theme of Agon, which is, as Yunus points out early on, really tends to appear an awful lot in the early writings where he's more obsessed with the Greeks. But then as Yunus charts out, this really is a consistent theme, a crucial theme. He's not trying to reduce Nietzsche to this one theme, of course, right? But he's in teasing out certain aspects of Nietzsche's work. He's also encountering the Greeks in a really meaningful and powerful way. So when I say this is a tour de force book, this is a volume that's going to be important for generations to come for Nietzsche scholars, but for continental philosophy in general, for modernist studies, very much so for classical studies, within the different subdisciplines of philosophy, philosophers of sport, philosophers of education, political philosophers, aestheticians, and those concerned with ethics will all get a great deal from this. In many ways, as Yunus points out early in the volume, Nietzsche was working from a very limited perspective on ancient Greek contestation. Whether that contestation be in the arts or sport, and the way in which the realms of art and sport are unified through ritual is something that Yunus teases out really, really powerfully here. But of course, Nietzsche didn't have the benefit of the findings of the past 140 years. Yeah. And so in many ways, what's really exciting about this book is the ways in which Yunus teases out or contests Nietzsche's opinions on certain things. What have the developments in, say, sport archaeology shown us in the past 140 years, and how might Nietzsche's views stand up to that? And so for that alone, this is an incredibly important volume. So a couple key themes to me that I'd like to just kind of throw out there before I hand things over to Yunus. This book has had me over the past week or so up at night floating around these notions of Agon, of course, but also arete, excellence, if you will, if you want to translate it as such, and athlon, what you may want to call prize, and how notions of Agon are contestation, and the struggle for excellence, or arete, and the quest for a prize, how far our culture has come from that. And I would say, if anything's in contest, really, in this book, it's our own culture. I have several questions for Yunus, but I don't want to dominate the conversation. The evening is to celebrate Yunus in this book, and so I'll hand it over to Yunus to talk about it.
All right, hi everybody. I don't know. Thank you for this wonderful introduction. I don't know where to start, but I can give you a very brief overall. Once you get to read the book, I hope you can if you haven't done it. I was inspired by my professor Rainer Schürmann in actually his lecture on the Greeks. Interesting enough, on Parmenides, You will not think of Parmenides as an agonistic philosopher, but I'm going to assure one he was. And his interpretation of tragic Greek philosophers so it inspired me. That's in the 1990s. Then when I wrote my dissertation, I had to rush it because my advisor was leaving. So I sort of limited myself to Nietzsche's works. I didn't have time to go into Greeks, all the Greek. This is a bottomless pit, this whole Greek Agon. I mean, even this book only touches the tip of the iceberg. There's so much literature on so many different aspects of the Greek cultural Agon that there's no way that any book can cover. But I tried to cover some of the essentials that were crucial to Nietzsche. The one thing that wasn't crucial to Nietzsche, for whatever reason, the erotics in Greek Agon. Nietzsche doesn't really talk about that, and I didn't want to go there, but this is another big topic. So then, anyway, after my dissertation, then I did start doing more research. I read a lot on history of sports, history of Greek sports, and also thanks to David, I got involved with IAPS, which is the International Association for Philosophy of Sport. In fact, I'm also writing essays, thanks to you, actually, for leading me in that way, which fits perfectly with what I do. So then, after that, basically, if I can summarize some essential points about my book, Agonistics, which pretty much means, if I can summarize it, to compete with more or less your equal in a given field before a public to produce the best. In a nutshell, that's what Greek Agon is, that's what it was. They competed in almost everything, in all the culture. They compete in sports, also in arts, music, drama. Today, if we read Greek tragedies like Aeschylus, because Aeschylus won the contest in Greek drama, that's why we read them. So the Greeks, what we have, they produce by competing. So agonistic culture was very competitive, it was productive in the sense of creation, they're very creative. But my main thesis, which clearly is Nietzsche also, is that it is this kind of agonistic culture that is full of sparks, fire, or chutzpah, if I can use that term, to produce, be productive. And we can learn a lot from them. Now, many Nietzsche scholars who are attracted to this topic, unfortunately, they don't go too deep into the dynamics of Agon. Here, clearly, David and I differ from these other Nietzsche scholars that we want to understand the dynamics. What are those dynamics? The myth, the sacred, the notion of sacrifice, the way ancient Greeks practiced sacrifice, their cult practices, so forth and so on. So my first two chapters are the long chapters, but they show these contexts, these larger pictures of Greek Agon, the way they consider the myth, Greek polytheism. Today we are too far away from understanding polytheism. And I don't want to say I'm a polytheist, but definitely I'm a defender. In this book, I'm a defender of polytheism. It is thanks to Greek polytheism that they could be so productive, that they produce poetry, they produce drama, sports, all these things that today we owe so much to Greeks because they were polytheistic. And that's the first chapter. Then in the second chapter I go discuss the whole notion of the sacred and all that. So pretty much those are the kind of the foundations of the book. And then after that, Nietzsche's other ideas. Then the other important topic that I explore is competition is not just competing for anything or in any place or with anybody. There's a context for competition. That's how it was for the Greeks. Nietzsche understood it. Now the thing is, Nietzsche's understanding. Nietzsche was, as you may know, he was a Greek philologist. Clearly he read so much of Greek literature. He knows it, but he doesn't always show it. So people who just read Nietzsche and they do not know the way Greek agonistics works, they find Nietzsche, I don't know, arrogant or too aggressive. Nietzsche always attacks, right? And people always get offended by his aggressive style. But that aggressive style has a lot to do with agonistics. So he's attacking in a certain context. He's not just attacking. It's like almost like in sports, boxing, right? Boxers attack each other. So I mean, who is Nietzsche's opponent? Usually we know who his opponents are. he mentions them, but sometimes if not, maybe he's attacking ideas, then clearly we don't exactly know who his opponents are. So for that, you have to know more about ideas, more about history, but he is attacking someone or some idea for a purpose within a specific context. So that's another thing I try to establish in my book. But then the third thing is about some of the ideas like Übermensch, overhuman, highly misinterpreted, used by anybody. I claim that, and this is maybe very difficult to defend, but I try my best, that Nietzsche was inspired by ancient Greeks with these ideas. The idea of Übermensch, or overhuman in English, can be traced back to the Greek agonist. Very similar. The more I read about the Greeks, the more I see parallels between Nietzsche's ideas about especially this overhuman and the Greek contestants or agonists and their struggles, the way they try to outdo or do better in struggle to always perfect themselves, the whole concept of arete, excellence, idea of excellence. And then clearly there's all process of training, education that they had to go through. They had both pan-Hellenic sites. The whole notion of pan-Hellenism is a big discussion in Greek scholarship. I try to deal with it a little bit. And they also competed in their local places, in their own city-states. Then the idea of cosmopolitanism, how agonism is really related to cosmopolitanism. All the Greeks were not entirely cosmopolitan, but nonetheless it does carry that spirit of cosmopolitanism that is also in Nietzsche. And that by itself destroys all that the misguided interpretation of Nietzsche after he died. Unfortunately, because of partly because of his sister, and partly because of his free style, that anybody could think that they could just grab Nietzsche, although they are not in touch with his spirit. I mean, specifically the Nazis. And Nazi ideologues, especially people like Wagner. Anyway, and then what else? Then I also dealt with how the cult of Agon or agonistics actually relates to other functions in ancient Greek world, and Nietzsche was aware of that. Things like Dionysian, the ecstatic unity of all. Ancient Greeks were, yes, they were Dionysian, they were ecstatically bound, and they competed with that spirit. One more point has to do with the former matriarchal vestiges. If you studied ancient Greek history, you know that there were matriarchal cults before, and then the Zeus order came in, but they did have a lot of